I am happy to report that I had a good start to my reading year. Hi everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be my January wrap up. It is the first month of the year. I really wanted to start it off strong, and I think I did have some lower rated books in here, but in general I did have a fair few 5 stars. I found a new series that I think could possibly be an all-time favourite, and yeah, I just generally had a pretty good start to my reading year. So I'm not going to ramble on too much more. I will give you a couple of stats, but then I will jump into explaining a little bit more of my thoughts and feelings and exactly what I read throughout the month of January. So I read a grand total of 11 books during the month of January, which is pretty good for me in all fairness. I think I average usually between 8 and 10, so 11 is definitely on the sort of above average side for me. And I'm actually really happy about the amount of books I've read, because I am focusing on kind of keeping up the pace, because both 2020 and 2021 were sort of my highest amount of books read in a year to date. But I don't just want to concentrate on the number, I also want to make sure that I'm reading books that I'm really excited about and books that I'm really enjoying if possible as well. And I feel like I've hit that nice balance now. I kind of know what my reading tastes are, and I'm not picking up things that I really have no interest in, but I'm just reading for the sake of it. And I'm picking things up that I'm actually really excited to read. So it's meaning that I'm reading more, but also reading things that I really love. So that is fantastic. Speaking of reading more, the amount of pages that I read this month was 4,808, which averages out at 155 pages per day, which is great because I had a reading goal last year of reading 100 pages per day, and I want to keep that up this year as well. There were some days where I read 0, there were some days where I read 400. As long as it balances out, I'm pretty happy. Now for the format of the books that I read this month, I definitely sort of hit a little bit of a physical reading slump. I read 2 books entirely physically. I read 1 book that was entirely audio, and then 8 books that were a mixture of the two. Basically, I'm finding that at the minute I am like borderline on a reading slump, which is weird because like I said, I'm reading a lot and I'm really enjoying what I'm reading. But I think if I wasn't doing the sort of mixture, I could very much not pick anything up. So I found that nice balance of being able to kind of physically read and audiobook. What's quite good is that I can kind of physically read without the audiobook when I'm in the mood to. Then when I feel like I need to keep the audiobook on while I'm physically reading, I'll do that. But also then I will just listen to the audiobook when I'm on my way to work. So it's a nice balance where I can literally mix it up however I'm feeling at the time and what's going to suit me, and that's stopping me from hitting that slump, which is great. For the age range that I read in the month of January, I'm definitely moving more and more towards adult, because I read 8 adult books and only 3 YA. So I feel like I do still have months where I will kind of swing more towards YA, but it tends to be like a 50-50, just with a few more YA than adult. But then there are definitely months where I just read pretty much entirely adult. It's what I'm moving more towards. I mean, it suits, right? That is the age range that I'm in, so it makes perfect sense. But I do still like to pick up some YA, and actually I think in February I have a fair amount of YA to read, so I'm not opposed to it, but I am liking reading the adult books more now. And finally, for star ratings, I had 3 3-star books, 2 4-star books, and then 6 5-star books. So like I said, quite a lot of 5 stars. It meant I had an average of 4.27 for the month. I will say that the 3 stars, some of them were higher 3 stars and some of them were lower 3 stars. I will get to that in a minute, but definitely some quite meh books in there. But the 5 stars were high 5 stars. I'm just going to start talking about what I read basically, because actually the first books I read were all 5 stars. It was a new series. It's probably going to be an all-time favourite, and yeah, these were very high 5-star ratings. So the first 3 books that I read this month was the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. So we have Jade City, Jade War and Jade Legacy. Now I will talk about these individually a little bit, but it is kind of just wrap up for the entire series because I did read them all in the space of a week. Basically, I have mentioned a few times on this channel that I had a plan for the beginning of the year, because last year I started off by reading a trilogy. All 3 of them got 5 stars. It's a new favourite trilogy. I say new, it's been a year now, but it's these ones behind me. It's Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I now own multiple copies of the series. I loved it, and I kind of wanted to recreate that energy this year. So I started off with another trilogy that I owned because I bought some special editions without reading them, and so I have the Illumicrate versions. And yeah, I'm happy to report I really love them. I actually read them while I was in quarantine with COVID, and I adored this series. So Jade City, brilliant start to a series full of political intrigue. So for anyone who doesn't know, this is about a fantasy world where jade, as in the stone jade, can be sort of used for power, for magic, and there's only certain people who are able to use the powers, and those people kind of rule the city. But there are sort of different groups that are fighting for control of the city, so it has got kind of like mafia gangster style vibes to it. It's set in a Chinese inspired world as well, which I have read like a few sort of Asian mythology inspired books, but I've not really read much that is in more of like a modern day style urban fantasy setting, and I just really loved this. It was a great start to the series, and then it carried on very well into Jade War, which kind of just carried on the story. It took everything that was set up in the first one and then built on it, and I loved this one. And then particularly I really loved the last one, which was Jade Legacy. I'm obviously not talking about the second two too much because spoilers, but the third one in particular, the timeline of it spread out a lot further, and you really got to see more of these characters' lives. And I like books that do tell like a longer story and you can kind of see snippets of someone's entire life to kind of, so you get the full picture, and that's what the third one felt like, and that's why I really loved it. It just had that sort of storytelling that I really loved. I just really love this series. It was full of political intrigue, which is exactly the type of fantasy I like, and to be honest, I'm looking forward to rereading the series already, and I've only just read it. So very happy to have read these, very happy that I liked them, considering that I have this beautiful set, because now it's going to take pride of place on my bookshelf. There is actually a gap for it right there next to my Poppy War series. I'm keeping all of my Illumicrate archive collections together, so very happy to have read these ones. The next book that I read during the month of January was also a 5-star, I will tell you up front. I read it to see what all the hype was about, because we all kept hearing about it on BookTube. We are all still hearing about it on BookTube, and the hype, I understand it. It's a Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I mainly heard about this book from Becca Fowle. She does not stop talking about this book. It was her favourite book that she read last year, and it's kind of become her brand now, and I wanted to see what the hype was about. I do enjoy a contemporary romance, and I won't lie, when I first started reading this book I was worried I wasn't going to like it, because it did take me a little bit of time to get into it. I don't think that was anything to do with the book though. I think it was more of a personal thing, because basically this is an adult romance that is set around the world of science. The main character, Olive, is a PhD student, and she ends up in a fake dating situation with this guy who is Adam Carlson, and basically it's to cover up a lie that she's made to a friend, and he for whatever reason agrees to go along with it, and obviously real feelings are gonna develop at some point. It is full of tropes, definitely, like I will say that. There's not too much that's like massively original in this book, but it's just handled so well, it's written so well. The reason why I took a little bit of time to get into it is that Olive, as a PhD candidate, is sort of doing her research project, and she's researching a particular type of cancer that happens to be something that I have sort of a personal connection to from my family, so it was just a little bit hard to read at first. I just kind of wasn't expecting it. I kind of forgot that I did know before, but I kind of forgot when I started reading it that that's what she was researching, and I think it just jarred me a little bit at the beginning. But basically what I did is I kind of didn't read it too much for a few days. I listened to an audiobook instead that I will get to next, and then when I came back to it and was able just to kind of read it all in one go, I basically read it over the space of like a day and a half. Then I understood what the hype was about. I just read it all and kind of forgot about the stuff that was throwing me off of it, because the romance was just so good. I really enjoyed this. It was just a fun read, to be honest, and I'm excited to read Ali Hazelwood's next book, which will be coming out later this year. So I did just say that I'll talk about the audiobook next, but I forgot that I actually read this one in the middle of reading Love Hypothesis as well. I was doing the readathon TBRPG-a-thon, which was hosted by Ro from One Room Through Worlds, and I was sort of halfway through 2 books for that, and decided that I just wanted something that I could read really quickly in one night. I just wanted something fun, and I think the prompt was something about strength or something like that, and the main character in this graphic novel fit that perfectly, because it is Buffy Volume 1. So this is the reboot comic book series. It is the story of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or the characters, should I say, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but in a more modern day setting. There are things that are similar to the TV show, but then there are things that are changed. There are storylines that kind of happen later on that already exist at the start of this, and I gave this one 4 stars. I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed just having a new story about these characters. It was one of my favourite TV shows growing up. I mean, I say one of my favourites, it was my favourite TV show. It was kind of my identity for a point. It still is to some extent, and I really enjoyed just being back in this world, but being such a big fan of the show, it was also a little bit strange to kind of be with these characters in a whole different setting, because I have to kind of forget what I know about these characters because a lot of that stuff hasn't happened or isn't going to happen. So it was just a little bit strange, but I did really enjoy it. I think I'll probably get more into this series as it goes along, although I do know that the art style changes for the second one, so I know that a lot of people actually preferred the first one to the second one. I don't own the second one yet, so we will see what happens when I eventually get around to it, but I'm glad that I've read this one at least so far. Now we'll get into the audiobook that I was listening to, because I listened to this one over the space of about a week. It's the next in the many Robin Hobb books that I have to read. It is Ship of Destiny, which is the last book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. Now I went on a ride with this one. I started off thinking this is going to be 5 stars. I got into it so quickly. I kind of knew exactly where I was from the previous two, because for sort of reference, the first book in this series I gave 4 stars because it took me a while to get used to the new characters. The second book I gave 5 stars because it was really good, and this one started off as a 5 stars, and then it kind of lost its way a bit in the middle. I was listening to the audiobook and I felt myself getting lost, but it was just kind of plodding along before we got to the final part. And then it got to like the last sort of 300 pages, which sounds ridiculous when you're talking about the last 300 pages, but it is a 900 page book. And it got to about the last 300 pages and things just started happening, and this was so good. It was such a good conclusion to the series. I ended up giving it 5 stars. There were characters in this series that I hated at the beginning, loved at the end. There were characters that I was intrigued by at the beginning and thought I would like and hated at the end, and it was just a ride. There were some really sort of horrible scenes to read. The nature of the violence in this particular series is different from that in the Farseer trilogy, and it can be quite difficult to read at times, definitely, but I do feel like as a whole this book handled all of that type of stuff really well, and I just really enjoyed this book. I can't speak too much about it obviously without giving spoilers, but it is about a world where there are these ships that when 3 generations of particular family have died on that ship, it comes to life, and there's so much more than that to it, because by this point it is so much more than that, and it kind of gives you whole new context to things that happened in the first series as well. And I just love seeing how all of this bigger world fits together, and I'm so excited to carry on with the next trilogy and go back to Fitz and see how he's getting along. I really love Robin Hobb. I say this every month, but I do. There is more Robin Hobb coming up later, by the way, so prepare for me to gush again in a little bit. The next book that I read was a novella that took me way too long to read, because it took me like 6 days when it should have taken me 1 or 2 at the most, and that is A Song for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This one got 4 stars. This is, like I said, a very short book compared to the last one. This is ridiculous, but yeah, this one took me as long as the last one to read. I started reading it on train on the way to London and then kind of never picked it up again until the weekend after, so it didn't completely take me 6 days. It was 2, but there was a big gap in the middle. It's about a monk. He lives in a world where there once were robots, and the robots all kind of abandoned the human race at some point, but said that they would come back in the future and check on them and see how they were getting on. And it is said about this monk who's a little bit lost in his life, not quite sure what path he wants to take, and he goes on this bit of a trek. He's exploring things and he ends up coming across one of these robots who is coming back to check and see how things are getting on, and it is about their kind of interactions. It is the start of a series. I am excited to read the next one. I feel like this set up a lot and the next ones could be absolutely amazing, but it had a lot of sort of deep thoughts in here, a lot to kind of ponder about not knowing your place in the world and kind of figuring all that out. And yeah, I think that this could be a really good series. I kind of wish that it was a bit longer. I kind of wish it was a full-length book. I think when I read them back, if I can read a few in one go, it will feel like a full-length book. I think that will be perfect for me. It's just kind of stopped right where I wanted it to get started. I then read Let's Call It a Doomsday by Katie Henry. I've had this one for a while. I've read a book by her previously. It was Heretics Anonymous, and I really enjoyed that one. And this one I bought when it first came out and just never got around to reading it, and I gave this one 3 stars. There were things that I really liked, there were things that I didn't like. It was very middle of the road 3 stars. It basically is about a girl called Ellis who has anxiety, and the way that her anxiety manifests mainly is that she catastrophizes things, and she is constantly thinking that the world is going to end. She's become a bit of a sort of doomsday prepper, and she's in therapy to help her out with this. And in the therapist's office one day, she meets this other girl who tells her that she actually knows when the world is going to end and how it's going to happen. So they kind of team up to prepare for this because they believe that it's all to do with them two being together. And the thing is that the stuff with Ellis and her anxiety, I really enjoyed. I don't know if that's the right word. It actually felt way too real at times, to be honest. But I did really appreciate the way that that was done. I liked Ellis as a character. With Hannah, the other girl, I just found her to kind of be there and being a little bit sort of over the top and flighty and ridiculous for no reason. She would just kind of flitter in, talk about her dreams and then disappear. And I wish that she was built up a little bit more. By the end of it, she started to have more of a story, and you did start to understand her a little bit more, but it happened a little bit too late. She felt very two-dimensional for about 3/4 of this book until she suddenly became 3D at the end of it. Like I said, it was a 3-star and it was a good 3 stars, so I definitely did enjoy parts of it, but I did prefer Katie Henry's first book that I read from her. I do have another one of hers to read, and I'm more interested in that story, so I'm hoping that I'll like that one. This hasn't put me off reading that. It was just not everything that I wanted it to be, but still a worthwhile read. We are now going back to Miss Robin Hobb. I listened to the audiobook, but I do now own the physical copy of The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince. This is a short story novella type book. It is about as long as Song for the Wild Bill, actually, and it is a prequel to everything that's happened in the Realm of the Elderlings. It is set many years before, and it's talking about the Farseer line, so it is mainly leading on to the Fitz books, but it is advised that you read it after you have read the first Farseer trilogy, because to be honest, otherwise you won't really understand it, because they talk about the magic system within this world without really giving you too much context for it. It is really talking a lot about kind of how that magic system came to be viewed in the way it is now, because there are two types of magic, and one of them is viewed positively and one of them is viewed negatively, and this talks a lot about that. It also kind of shows you how long that bloodline has been full of drama, really. It was a very intriguing book. I just found myself really wanting to know what was going to happen and how this was all going to work out. It was a short story, it was a fairly quiet story, but also so much happened in it. I love Robin Hobb's writing. I don't think I need to say that anymore. This is a book that if you are reading the Realm of the Elderlings, and particularly the Fitz books, I would recommend that you do read this one. Don't just think you can skip it. I think it is very good to have this extra knowledge. Apparently as well, some of the stuff in this is referenced in the next trilogy, the Toryman trilogy, which is why I've read it now, ready to start reading the Toryman trilogy next month. And yeah, I really liked this one, so not much else to say. It was 5 stars. Unfortunately, now to say that I had a good start to my reading year, I now have my 2 kind of least favourite books of the month towards the end, which is a little bit rubbish. But the first one is actually one that I can see why people would like it. It's just not for me. It was The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. I have read Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow before. I've actually just unhauled it. I have passed it on to someone else though, so it's fine. I've not just got rid of it. I've passed it on to someone who will very much appreciate it. But this one I have been very interested in. About a girl called January who basically discovers this door to somewhere else, and she's not quite sure what they mean, and there's also this book that she finds, and it's kind of about storytelling, really. It's hard to explain the premise of it, to be honest, without kind of spoiling a lot of it, so I'm not even going to try. But there was definitely things that I enjoyed about this. This was, again, sort of a middle of the road 3-star, possibly slightly on the lower end for me personally, but I can't really explain why. The writing was great. It was flowery, it was beautiful. It's exactly the writing style that I think that I would expect to enjoy, and I did enjoy the writing of it, but there was something about the plot and the characters that I just didn't feel connected to, and I just didn't really have too much interest in finding out what was going to happen, and I don't know why. It was the same with Once and Future Witches. All I can say is Alex E. Harrow is obviously not an author for me. I can understand why people would enjoy her work, and I'm happy that plenty of people do, but I don't think I'll be picking anything up from her in the future. I am very happy that I have read this though, because I was very intrigued by it, and I'm glad that I read it and sort of found out that it wasn't for me, but still got to sort of take in the story. I just I wish I would have liked it more. That's basically all I can say. And then the last book that I read during the month of January was probably my least favourite book of the month, and that was Law by Alexandra Bracken. So I read this one for the Recreate Book Club. The live show for that is actually this weekend as this video goes up, and I knew I probably wasn't going to like this, to be honest. When I said I'm trying to read books that I think I will love, this was an anomaly to that rule, definitely. I read it for a book club, and I had a few days left at the end of the month where I finished everything else I wanted to read, so why not pick it up? But I did hope I would like it. I did go in with sort of an open mind. I've read another book from Alexandra Bracken before. I read the first Darkest Minds book, and I did enjoy it at the time. I didn't complete the series just because I'd sort of got out of that dystopian world at that point in time, I think. But this one intrigued me more because it was more of like an urban fantasy. It's basically about a world where for 1 week every 7 years the Greek gods are made mortal and they wander around the world, and basically they can be killed, and if you kill one of the gods you sort of take their place and inherit their power, so people go out and hunt them down. And the main character ends up finding one of these gods dying on her doorstep, and she gets pulled into a lot of that drama. And that sounds like a really interesting premise, and for parts of it it was a really interesting premise. But I also feel like the way that the information that you needed for this book was given to you wasn't handled particularly very well. Like, I don't know too much about the Greek gods. Just, I know the names of a lot of them, but I don't know too much about how everything works, how people are sort of related to each other, if there's any sort of like hierarchy or anything like that. It's just not been something that I've looked into too much. And I feel like I probably needed to know more going in, but also I shouldn't have needed to know more going in because if the story's set up well, I shouldn't have needed that knowledge. But it felt kind of like for a lot of it you would go along and she would kind of expect you to just understand, or maybe not understand but just get on with it for a while, and then all of a sudden there would just be like an info dump and be like, okay, so all that stuff that you've been struggling to understand for the last like 40 pages, here's what it meant. And it just, yeah, it just felt like that a lot throughout it. Like I would just kind of be like, okay, I have no idea what's happening, and then all of a sudden there would be like 2 pages of just pure information thrown at you, and I'm like, okay, now I get it. And I didn't enjoy that, to be honest. I didn't enjoy the way that it was set up, and again, I didn't particularly like connect with any of the characters. Like, I was rooting for the main character in general, but not for any particular reason. I can't really like recall too many like particular character traits of her or anything like that. And yeah, it was just very middle of the road. It was a low 3 stars. It was the lowest 3 star of all the 3 stars that I gave out this month. And again, I'm glad I did read it because I know it is a fairly sort of Marmite book. You either love it or hate it. I fall more on the disliking side of it, and I'm glad that I now know that opinion. And I'm interested to be hanging out in the chat for the live show as well, because I want to see kind of what other people's thoughts on it were, particularly the people who liked it. I want to know kind of, I want to understand it from their side, I suppose. But yeah, just unfortunately again a book that was not for me. So these are the books that I read in the month of January. I'm pretty impressed with this stack, to be honest, especially with having this chunky series at the bottom that I started off with. I really enjoyed a lot of what I read this month, and to be honest, even the stuff that I didn't enjoy, I still kind of enjoyed the process of reading it, even if I didn't enjoy the outcome of it. It's a bit strange, but yeah, I've had a really good reading month. I struggled at times to kind of have the motivation to pick a book up, but when I did, it actually ended up being one of the sort of best parts of my month. So I hope I can sort of carry on that kind of positive energy throughout the year. And that is pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know how your reading month went in January. Did you have a good start to the year? If not, let's move on from it, onwards and upwards from here. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye.